Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or as we like to say here at Shady Acres Woodshop, howdy. Today I have a small piece of what I believe is spalted maple, and I've drilled a clearance hole for my chuck here and a 5/16 inch hole for my woodworm screw. We're going to get this mounted up. I think I'm going to attack it from this side, from the headstock side first, to get this rounded up in an attempt to keep the bark on. I want this to be a live edge piece, and just for clarification, I define a live edge piece as bark on and a natural edge piece as bark off, but you still have the natural edge. This is roughly 8 inches across this way, 6 inches this way, about 4 inches on this end, and 3 inches on this end. So let's get this mounted up and we'll get to turning. I don't believe I'm going to be able to keep all of the bark, just as much as I possibly can, but this high edge here has probably got to go to get down to the level of the other bark, other edge. I'm hoping this will tighten up before it bottoms out on the edge of my chuck here, chuck jaws, and I'm not so sure it did. So I'm going to take this back off, chisel away a little bit of that high bark. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I think this, yeah, you can see a little bit of shiny part there where this part of the bark is hitting the front of the jaw. So I'm going to chisel that away and then get it remounted. So here's what I've done. I just chiseled this area out here and tried to get this as flat in this corner as the rest of it. And the reason that's important is that if you don't get it flat, then your bottom won't be parallel, and you'll end up wasting away wood trying to get it flat. So let's see if that worked. See if this looks parallel. Well, it's not necessarily a straight cut anyway, but yeah, that's pretty good. I think we're good to go. So let me get my mask and face shield on and we'll get to turning this spalted maple bowl, live edge. You may have noticed I've also taken some CA glue and filled in around the bark area in an attempt to keep it stable. The bark feels pretty solid, but it's hard to know. I don't know when this was cut. We're going to be turning at about 700 RPM, mask and face shield on. Okay, we're round. I'm pretty happy with that, so we'll go to work on the bottom here. Needs to be flattened out and put a tenon on it. And I'll just use my live center and a pencil to lay out an approximate diameter of the tenon. This always turns out to be about 1/8 of an inch too big. (1200 RPM). Now I'm just going to take this diamond point tool to create a straight side on this tenon. And that's good. You need to clean up this bottom a little bit. Do that with a smaller 3/8 inch bowl gouge. That's good. I'm going to leave this and go to work on this side and see how much of this is left. I believe we are ready to sand. Stand by. Okay, using my 2-inch sanding discs, I'm going to start with 80 grit and work up through 400 at least. I'm also going to turn my fan on here, blow some of this sawdust away. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the next little while, and I will alternate between reverse, which is what I'm doing now, and forward. And I'll bring you back when it's time to put some finish on here. I've decided to go with sanding sealer and shellac, which I guess is probably my preferred method of finish. But I do use lots of others as well. And I did sand this up through 600 grit. I typically will do finer than 400 on a small piece like this. I think people like to pick them up and handle them more than a large piece, and so I want it to be extra smooth. This bark is just going to look great when all is said and done here. There are some cracks in this. Maybe you can see that one right there. Pretty decent sized crack, but that doesn't really bother me. That's just Mother Nature at work. So I will put on at least 2 coats of this sanding sealer and at least 2 coats of shellac, and I will bring you back when it's time to turn this around and start hollowing it out. Can't wait for that part. Kind of fun to do a small one. I do quite a few large ones, and sanding and finishing and, well, everything just goes faster on a small one, that's all. It's like a vacation day. See you in a bit. I've put 3 coats of sanding sealer on here. This is shellac based sanding sealer. And I decided to stop there. I was going to go ahead and put the shellac finish on, but because the bark from the top comes down over the side, I figured I can put the shellac on all at the same time. So I'm going to stop with the sanding sealer and start working on the inside and hollowing this out. And then when I'll put 2 or 3 coats of sanding sealer on the inside, and then we'll go with shellac over the whole thing, and I think I can get these lower bark areas covered better than I can from this position. So let's get this off of the woodworm screw. And then, as I always do, I like to just barely tighten the chuck and then drive that tenon in and then tighten up the chuck jaws. That way I'm sure it's well centered and well seated and I've got a good grip. And we will not need tailstock support for this, it's so small. So we'll just get rid of that. And I'll get my bowl gouge sharpened up. We'll probably go with well, I don't know, I might just drill this out. Now at its highest point, which is about here, this little bowl is about 3 inches deep. So I'm going to drill maybe 2 inches deep. But I'm going to do it forward. That'll be a good idea. And we'll just take it nice and slow and easy. Turning at just under 300 RPM. That's just kind of a normal noise when you're turning a hole like this, that large. Well, let's see how deep we are here. I know I'm playing it safe. I'm going to go from the highest point, which is right here. We're at about 2 1/8 inches. And again, I have about 3. And of course, this Forstner bit leaves a little hole in the middle that I'm going to have to turn away. But I think I can get in here just a little bit more, another 1/4 inch or so. You know what happens sometimes with this particular chuck? And that's what happened this time. I'll show you. and it drives me nuts. The number 2 Morse taper is still in the tailstock. This has its own taper, and it's not holding on there. And I frequently have to clean it out, which is, you know, normal for a taper. And I do that, and then I tap it in here with a mallet, but it still breaks loose, and I don't know the answer. You know, it's an import, Chinese made, I suppose. Oh, am I hurting? Guess I'm bleeding. Probably got caught on one of these edges. Anyway, maybe I'll have to get a new one or see what they say about it. Anyway, well, I guess I'm not going to mess with it right now. I'm going to go get a Band-Aid. That's what I'm going to do. I'll just go ahead and turn that away. So let me get set up for turning. I think I said I was going to use a gouge, but since I drilled that out, I'm just going to go straight to this hollowing tool, and I might resort to the other, well, I probably will resort to the other hollowing tool. I don't know. But let me get my mask and face shield on here, and we're going to be turning at about 1200 RPM. Well, this is my first impression with this particular tool on something it was probably meant to do, rather than last week when I tried to use it on that large, what was it, 12 inches, 11, 12 inches, I can't remember, big bowl, and I was out here with it, and there was so much torque, I couldn't hold it still. But this is a piece of cake. This is way easier, and I believe this is what it was meant to do. Small vessels like this, and probably vases that are long and slender, that sort of thing. I don't think it's meant to be out here 6 inches away from center. So I'm pretty happy with that, but it sure does clog up in a hurry. And I know it's very early on, but I'm just gonna get an idea of my bottom thickness here. And I'm at about 3/4 of an inch. And I gotta go way out here on the sides. Well, maybe I'll measure that side while I'm at it. Yeah, that's about an inch. And I'm not sure what I'm gonna do around the mouth here. This part that I had to chisel out for fitting over my chuck jaws, obviously I'm gonna have to get rid of that little ledge in there, which is gonna open up this mouth further. I didn't really want that, but that was something I had to do. So we'll just play it by ear like always. You know, that's so fast and easy. I see where you could go right through the side and not even be aware you're that close. But I'm not that close, but I see where it could happen. I'm just going to check often. About a 1/2 inch in the bottom, about 3/4 on the sides. And I think I've gotten rid of that little ledge I was talking about, kind of right here. Got a little tiny bit more to go. Okay, I've readjusted my tool rest, and I'm going to switch to this hollowing tool to get over here a little further. The bottom's not bad, the sides are still a little thick. You know, I think it was just last week's video I said I'm not making this kind of bowl anymore where the opening is enclosed because it's so hard to sand inside there. And then here I go and do it again. Still got a ways to go. I really don't want to lose this bark. So I'm really paying attention on the inside here. If I lose the bark, I've lost the whole dang thing because that's what makes the piece. And it's sounding a little hollow, a little weak. But I still got probably just over a 1/4 inch. And this is getting real thin right there. In fact, I can see through it. Dang it. Yeah, I don't want to lose that. That part of the bark right there is darker than the rest of it. Or maybe it's just because it doesn't have any sanding sealer on it yet, but I can see right through right here. Oh boy, I really wanted to get this thin, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Maintain the bark at the same time. So I think we're about done. It's hard to get a smooth edge with this little tiny cutter. It does a real nice job of removing the wood, but there's little tiny ridges in there because it's so hard to keep it from doing that. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's just the way it is. I don't think I can get a scraper in there. Well, maybe I can. That actually did pretty good, but I gotta get that bottom corner a little better. Yeah, I still got a little ridge in there. I'm gonna go grind a little smaller. I've got 2 other scrapers, round nose scrapers, but I don't like to use them anymore since I ground this one into a negative rake. This is wonderful. This works perfectly, and I've become scared to use one of these. So I'm gonna go grind this into a negative rate so that I can get back in that corner a little better. I see that I can do it, but dang, I'm scared to anymore. Used to do it all the time. I don't know what the big deal is now, but it seems to be a big deal to me. Yeah, that would get right in there real good. All right, I'll be grinding and I'll be back. Well, I finished my grinding and now I wish I would have made a video of that. I learned a little, even though I've done it before, I learned a little. And I made it easier for me for next time. And maybe I'll do a separate video on that. But anyway, now I have a nice round negative rake scraper to get into this corner with and to use from now on a lot of pieces. And I have a smaller one than this. I think this is a 1 inch. My largest is 1.5 inches, and I also have a 1/2 inch, and I ground all of them. Anyway, so now let me get my mask and face shield back on and we will clean up this corner. I think that's about all I have left to do in this. Still turning just about 1200 RPM. I make sure I'm on center here. Yeah, that did it. Okay, now how am I going to get in there and sand that without tearing my fingers up? I don't know. I do need to sand these edges. They're very sharp. Probably use my Sandoflex for that. Okay, stand by for sanding. Okay, I'm going to start with my Sandoflex and I'm going to just kind of point it towards the middle of the bowl. And while it's spinning, I'm going to do that. And what that'll do is round these edges over just slightly without disturbing anything. So I've got the lathe turning about 400 RPM. And And I'm just doing it from the inside out because that's really all that's needed, and because I don't want to mess up my, it's not a finish, but it's the sanding sealer on the outside, which is very smooth right now. I don't want to mess that up. So I'll do that, and then on the inside I'm going to use my regular 2-inch sander, and I can get about halfway up the bowl with this without hitting anything. Almost all the way, but not quite. This high point is giving me problems. So I'll do that. I'll do the bottom, I'll do the side about halfway up. Then I'll just peel that off of there and stick my hand in there with the same grit and do the upper part. And I'll do that starting with maybe 100 grit. It's pretty nice, maybe 120. And up through 400, and then maybe 600 on the inside like I did on the outside. And I'll bring you back when it's time to put some sanding sealer in there. Well, the sanding went really well. Surprise to me, I only hit my thumb about 6 times. And so now I'm just applying sanding sealer to the inside and to the top part of this bark that I couldn't get before when I did the outside. When you make a rim like this that basically slopes in, it is so hard to sand and deal with it. Just do what I'm doing here. It's just an odd angle. And like I said in the last video, I'm not doing that anymore. Hopefully I learned my lesson. So this is the first of 2 or 3 coats of sanding sealer, and then I will apply at least 2 coats of shellac to the whole thing, inside and out. And then it'll be time to take off that tenon. I like this little bowl, little dish, whatever it is. Looks pretty cute. All right, the finish is done. Let's get this turned around and remove that tenon. So I'm just going to install my woodworm screw so that I can screw a block of wood on here, and that'll serve to drive this piece. Just lock the spindle in place, screw on my block. I finally took the time to glue some non-slip material on here so I don't have to fumble around with a piece of loose cloth. Then we'll put our bowl on here, which just barely fits. Bring up the tailstock. We still have our center hole for alignment. And let's see how aligned we are. And I like to test that alignment by just spinning the bowl at a slow speed and hold my thumbnail up here. And if it hits equally all the way around, then you know we're centered. There's a little bit of bumping sound, but that's caused by the marks from the chuck jaws. If I hold it out here, yeah, that's nice and smooth, so we're good. Then we'll just take a 1/2 inch standard grind bowl gouge and we'll turn it about 500 RPM and start removing that tenon. I'm going to switch to a 1/2 inch swept back so I can get in there tighter, also so that I can clean up this edge a little bit. I do want to leave that center raised area right here, but I do need to clean up this edge. Before I get that too small, I just want to make sure my edge is cleaned up. Yes, it is. Looks pretty good. And we'll just get that just a little bit smaller. Now I'm going to slow it down to about 200 RPM. I'm just going to press the bevel of the gouge against the bottom of the bowl. And I've got my left hand on the switch, and as soon as that little nub stops turning, then we know we're done. Well, it did disintegrate, but we got it finished anyway. So now we just have this little bit here to sand up, and I'll do that over here on the workbench. Well, there we have it. One live edge spalted maple bowl in the books. Turned out really nice, I think. The bottom finished up good. This was a fun project. It's a small bowl, just under 6 inches in diameter and just over 3.5 inches at the highest point here. About 3¼ inches here. Lots of really nice bark that stayed on. Yippee! And it still feels quite solid. I'm glad I did put CA around, all the way around before I got started. I think that probably helped. If you like this video, thumbs up please. I'd sure appreciate it. Your comments are always welcome and I respond to all of them. If you're a subscriber, thank you very kindly. I truly appreciate that more than you would know. If you're not a subscriber, you might consider becoming one. I put out regular videos about 1 a week, and I'd like to keep in touch. So for now, this is Phil, Shady Acres Woodshop, signing off.